Well, hello, I'm Jerry McKee, and welcome to Prime Time with Jerry McKee, and we got a special guest here. I'm just doing some clicking and moving some things around while I'm talking to you. We got Larry Candler, and he's going to tell you a lot of things about Lockhart, a little bit about himself, but he's got the scoop on Lockhart. We'll be showing some pictures and some slides. You'll be able to see those also. You can comment, let know what if you have a question or something like to ask him. When I'm sure that he'll know the answers about Lockhart. Yes, the chime's coming, right? Y'all used to the clocks by now. And let me pull up a sponsor here while I've got this thing going.
Pagana Mexican Restaurant, 441 North Duncan Bypass, Union, South Carolina, 864-429-4043. La Pagana, your family Mexican restaurants, has appetizers, child's plates, salads and soups, sandwiches, and desserts. Sizzling fajitas, Texas fajitas, shrimp fajitas. Also, they have great chicken, polo asado, chicken tenders, polo loco, and many more. If you like seafood, they have that also. Fish tacos, shrimp cocktail. They have many combinations that you can choose from in different price range. Matter of fact, they have 35 different ones. If you're a vegetarian, that's right, they can accommodate you also. Lunch menu, they have the Speedy Gonzales and about 13 others that you can make a combination with. That's La Pagana. La Pagana Mexican Restaurant, 441 North Duncan Bypass and Union, South Carolina, 429-4043.
Okay, we're back, and like I said, you're going to be listening to Larry Candler about a lot of things about Lockhart. So this is kind of focused totally on Lockhart today. And let me switch Larry over to you, and we can see his face instead of mine. Larry, how you doing?
I'm doing great tonight, Jerry.
Well, thank you for coming on, and because there's a lot of history and a lot of things you know about Lockhart. And when I was reading your book and looked at some of these pictures and stuff you sent, I was saying, wow, this is this is great, because who would know that Lockhart had so much stuff back then. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how long you lived in Lockhart, and a little about to build up the story there.
Jerry, I was born in Union Wallace Thompson Hospital. My parents lived in Lockhart at that time. And I've lived in Lockhart from 1940 to 1961. So all my formative years were in Lockhart, South Carolina. And I've shared this story about growing up in Lockhart at Furman University in a couple of classes up there, and it's been well received. Most people don't know where Lockhart is. So I'm excited to tell them about Lockhart, because I had a good life living there for the 20 years that I lived there, and it was a wonderful place to grow up.
And for our cousins that lives in Texas, it's not Lockhart, Texas, it's Lockhart, South Carolina.
Lockhart, South Carolina. And most people in the class had no idea where Lockhart, South Carolina was. So I always tried to help them out a little bit, and I said, okay, it's near Adamsburg.
That got them right there. And it's not that far away from Buffalo.
Not far from Buffalo, yes. So, yes.
I have fun with Buffalo when I go to New York.
Yeah.
They said, there's no way with that accent you're from here.
Well, it was a wonderful village to grow up on, I can tell you that. And, you know, Hillary Clinton wrote a book a few years ago about it takes a village.
Right.
It was based on an African proverb about it takes a village to raise a child. And I can tell you, I'm a product of a village. I mean, my parents had a lot of influence on me, but the village also had a lot of influence on me. The people that lived there, they looked after me. They made sure I didn't get into any mischievous. And
if you did, they'd tell on you.
They would tell on me, and when I got home, I got a belting.
Right, and you know, back then it wasn't really too awful if your neighbor down there kind of swatted you a little bit if you got in something pretty bad, and you didn't go home and tell your parents because you get another one.
There you go. Sure did.
Well, Larry, we got some slides. We got some pictures there. We want to show some people and stuff, and you can elaborate on those.
Let me give you a little history about Lockhart before we get into the slides that I have. Most people said, how did Lockhart come into existence? And there were a lot of stories going around about two deers locking horns and dying with their horns locked together, and it was Lockhart for a while. And then it became Lockhart. Well, the really true story about how Lockhart came about is there were two surveyors from England named Williams and Thomas Hughes. And they were surveyors in the state of Virginia. They finally migrated down to this area, and the King of England gave them a land grant for property in the area. And they selected a hillside, a steep hillside that sloped down to a flat area that bordered the Broad River. And the Broad River runs right through Lockhart, right on the edge of Lockhart.
So now people knows the real story.
Well, the story is they had a miller. They built a sawmill there, a flour mill, and a corn mill, and they had a miller named John Lockhart.
Oh, okay.
Now, William Hughes, he named the Lockhart Shoals. That's what he gave the name, Lockhart Shoals, and he named it after John Miller, who was an employee of his. So he must have liked him a lot to name the Lockhart Shoals after John Miller, and finally the Lockhart Shoals became just Lockhart.
Wow. You know, that's interesting because, you know, can you imagine the family, or if he can go back and look at it, you know, when it says May heyday and Lockhart, it's the whole town named after you. That's an honor, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It really is.
And to be an employee, he must have been a great employee.
Yeah, they must have really liked the service he was giving them as their miller.
Wow. That, you know, we're just kind of hard to understand how names and towns they come together.
Yeah.
Wow. You want to go into the slide?
Yes, let's go ahead and go into the slide. Now, the first slide you have right there is a slide of the mill. If it wasn't for that mill, there would not have been a Lockhart in all probability. And if you notice the mill, there's two plants there actually. There was one built in the late 1800s, about 1896. And the second plant was built around 1905. And there's a connection between the two plants, but if you notice, there's a canal in front of the mill, and the Broad River is behind the mill. And you can see the rocky area there of the river. There are places in that river where you can almost walk across it without getting into water, just by stepping on the rocks that are in the river there. But the canal, there's an interesting story about the canal. Before there was ever a plant there, a cotton mill, there was a canal there that was put in to provide navigation through the waterways from Buncombe County, North Carolina, all the way down to Columbia and all the way to the coast of Charleston. So they put a small canal in that was used to float cotton and other goods down the river. And in order to do that in Lockhart, they put in, there was several locks. They had locks in order to navigate through the different elevations as the water flowed down through the canal and back into the river. They had locks. Now, evidently that wasn't very successful, and that was a rather small canal. But when the textile mill was built, they had to have the water to run the textile plant. They didn't have electricity at that time. So the mill was run by a hydro-mechanical system, and the reason probably the mill was built where it was built is because the 50-foot drop of water from where the dam was all the way down to where the plant was. And that provided enough power for the water to drive the line shafts or what have you to run the mill.
Now, I noticed the name of the mill island. It just look like the mill sitting on an island.
It is an island.
I mean, why would they would? To me, that would be kind of, well, let's build this huge mill here on this little island, you know.
Well, when it was first built, with the river behind it and the small canal, of course, the canal was enlarged once the mills were put in service. They needed more water, and the small canal that was there for navigational purposes before this plant was built was smaller.
Okay.
So they built a larger canal there. So you got the canal on one side of the plant and the river on the other side of the plant. So it actually is on an island. And for the workers to get into the plant, you can see in this photo, and we'll talk about it a little bit more as we go into this presentation, you can see about midway, you see the platform that goes across the canal where workers can enter into the plant.
Right, it's like a walk. I think you've got a...
I've got another slide. We'll talk about that a little bit more as we get a little further into it.
All right, well, let's see what's... Matter of fact, here's the walkway.
That's the walkway right there. That's the bridge to the plant. You can see the workers streaming across that bridge. They had 3 shifts of operation. First shift was 8 till 4 in the afternoon. The second shift was from 4 in the afternoon till midnight. Third shift was midnight to 8 o'clock in the morning. And oftentimes when these workers strolled across this walkway, you could look at their hair and it'd be white from the cotton that had collected in their hair. And it depended on which process you were working in, how much cotton you might have in your hair. But because of that, a lot of people call the textile workers lint heads.
Oh, okay.
Lint heads. Now that was a negative term.
Right.
Very negative term.
I think they had a lot of names, and they named individuals in Lockhart.
Well, yeah. I mean, people look down on people who worked in the textile mill in some areas, and they called them lint heads. Now, you talked about names of people in Lockhart, or the names. River rats. We were river rats.
Right.
We right there on the Broad River, we became known as river rats. All right, let's take a look at the next one. You can see, now this picture, I tried to find a picture and I couldn't find one that would give you a real good idea of what that village looked like setting up on the hill. You see those houses on the right there?
Yes.
That's New Hill. But I can tell you, when you came from Chester toward Lockhart on Highway 9, when you got to the top of the hill, as you started down to the bridge that crossed over the river, you looked upon the village sitting up on the hill like that. And it was a picture-perfect setting. It appeared like it was a mountain village sitting up on this hill. It was just beautiful.
Yeah, and imagine up the hill looking down at the water and stuff.
Yeah. Beautiful setting for a village.
Now, did this walkway, was that a road or a walkway going across through
That's
there?
the same walkway that we just looked at. That's
okay.
The walkway that leads into the mill. Now, if you look at the left-hand side of that photograph, you see just years later, this wasn't there in the early years of the development of the community. That's the depot. You see that little white building there?
The white building.
Sitting right up on the edge of the canal there. That was the depot.
Yeah,
train
matter of fact,
depot.
I think we got
there's another photo of that. Yeah. Now, when I worked in the mill in the summer months, between school years, I built with J.D. Hyatt, who lived on the hill near me. He worked in the machine shop, and I went out there and helped him build a gate to allow people to walk across that walkway. What we had to do is put in a gate because there were a lot of people that were walking across there that weren't supposed to be there. So you had to be able to get through that gate in order to get into the plant.
Was it a revolving gate?
It was a revolving gate, and there was somebody watching it so that people weren't going in there. They weren't supposed to be there. Now this is a Lockhart trolley ferry. That photograph right there was taken in 1896. Now, I'm not sure how the machinery that went into the mill, the looms and spinning frames and what have you, I'm not sure how they got across the river. But they were shipped from Charleston. They weren't shipped from Charleston. They were put on a rail car from Charleston and sent to Hickory Grove, Sharon area. That was the nearest rail station to Lockhart in 1895, 1896, when this plant was built. I found information that said there were 9 rail cars completely packed with machinery that goes into this plant when they landed in Sharon, Hickory Grove area. And then they had to be transported to the river by oxen. And somehow they got them to the river. They either floated them down the river, the Broad River, and through that smaller canal that I mentioned to you. It may have been enlarged at that point, or they brought them to this point and put them on this. I can't imagine that they put them on this little trolley ferry here, but maybe that's how they got them across the river.
Yeah, I just wonder if that's just for people or...
Yeah, I'm thinking that's probably for people. I think I read something about they were trying to build a special boat to put this equipment on.
Right.
To ship it down the Broad River to get it to the place where it needed to go to put it into the mill.
Oh, okay.
Interesting photograph there, though. See all those horses on that raft and dogs and
and the cable line going across.
Cable line looks like it's tied down on the other side. Yes.
Wow. This is another picture. I think it's kind of like the one we had earlier.
Yeah, let me tell you about that picture. The New Hill there was something, maybe 35 or 40 houses built on the New Hill there, and they were built in 1920, 1921. And that little wordage on the top of that photograph said that they were built for an average cost of about $400 per house.
Wow. Boy, wouldn't that be nice today?
Yes, right.
Here's a group of folks that's kin to you.
They are kin to me. That's my grandparents and 9 of their 11 children. Now, why is that important in this discussion? Well, when they built the textile mill, there were a few farmers and people around in the area since the Hughes had settled that area in the middle 1700s, 1753, somewhere around there, but they needed workers. So where did they get those workers? They went to the mountains of North Carolina and advertised, if you come and work for us, we will put you on a train, we'll give you a train ticket, and we'll bring you down to Lockhart and put you to work in the mill, and we'll provide you a place to live. So my grandparents lived in the area around Asheville, a little north of Asheville, North Carolina. There is a town, by the way, on Highway 40 called Candler.
Yes.
You've probably seen it if you've driven up through there.
I've actually been there.
I told my wife, I said, if you marry me, I'm going to put your name in lights. It's not in lights, but there's a name on the road up there, and every time we pass it, I tell her, see there, I told you I was going to put your name in lights. It's not in lights, but you're right on the main road here. But anyway, they would go up there and advertise and try to get these poor people that were living there in the Asheville area and further north, farming for a living.
Right.
Probably trying to make a living. They probably were struggling to even make a living and feed their families. But this family here was very, it's what the mill was looking for. Right. They wanted a family with a lot of children because that was
more
employees to work in the company. Now, my Uncle Lonnie, who is sitting on the lap of my grandmother right there, 6 months old, his obituary when he died at the age of 82 said that he worked in the textile industry for 71 years.
Wow.
So he went to work in the textile industry at the age of 11.
My goodness.
And my father's in the middle there between my grandfather and my grandmother. Now, I believe that photo was taken in Lockhart, maybe beside the house that they moved into in Lockhart. I'm not sure about that, but that seems to be where it was taken. They moved to Lockhart in November of 1917, and that photo was taken in 1918.
You know, did the mill finance the houses for them? Or they?
You paid rent,
Oh, okay.
but they built the house. Now let me tell you what happened to them. There was a new mill being built somewhere near Great Falls, South Carolina. So the guy from Great Falls comes over to Lockhart and promises the workers, if you come over to Great Falls and you work in my mill over here, I'll give you a raise. So my grandfather packed up his 9 children and a cow and walked almost to Great Falls, South Carolina. They got over there, that's over 20 miles.
Oh, really? That's a long way.
It's a long way. They got over there, were over there a couple of weeks, and he reneged on the raise. So they turned around, walked back to Lockhart, left the cow over there. They got rid of the cow. They didn't walk the cow back. They walked back to Lockhart, moved right back into the same house that they had left when they went over to Great Falls to begin with. It's amazing.
Now, here's a bridge, not bridge over troubled waters, but over...
There's the bridge
Broad
right
River.
there over the Broad River. That's the first bridge built around 1919 and was taken out of service in 1949, in which case they put in a concrete and steel bridge across there, replacing that bridge. Now that bridge, when you went across that bridge in a car, it shook. And you can see the steel struts there. Now there's an interesting story about that bridge. When they were building that bridge, they put in a temporary bridge down below near the water across the river so that they could tear that one out and build a new one. Well, it rained for days upstream and in Lockhart, so the water started surging down the Broad River. I mean, it was really surging. And there was concern that that bridge was going to wash away. The temporary bridge was going to wash away. And I believe it was on a Sunday afternoon. I can't be sure of this, but it probably in 1947 on a Sunday afternoon, as I recall, including myself, there were a bunch of folks standing down there on the Lockhart side of the Broad River, watching that water rise and continue to rise and finally go over the top of the temporary bridge, and finally it washed it away. When that bridge washed away, now the only way you could get to Chester was to go through Carlisle.
Oh, so you
You had to go all around. It added about 20 miles to your trip to Chester, or something like that, which was only about 15 miles to begin with. And they had to live that way until they could get that bridge in service permanently.
Yeah, the bridge, like we had one like that in town I went in and rode his, and it was one car come through. You couldn't, no 2 cars could go across it. We only had one way, and you waited till the other one come back.
Yeah, that was pretty exciting to watch that bridge wash away. All right, this is an aerial view of the village around circa 2000. Now, there were 4 distinct areas of the village. There was the flat. Now, the flat was the area next to the canal. And then once you get through about 4 rows of houses, it begins to rise up into the top of the hill, and then you have the hill, and then the new hill, and then there's no man's land. And no man's land is an area at the bottom of that photograph in the center. A lot of the houses have been torn down now, but no man's land is basically kind of remote from the rest of the village. You have to cross over the canal and take a road under the bridge to circle around toward no man's land.
And you can see that road underneath circle right
You
there
can see it.
underneath there, can't you?
Yeah, you can see it circling underneath there. So there were 4 distinct areas. Now the first area built was down in the flat. Those were the first houses built. And a lot of those houses were brick. And some have said that the reason a lot of those were brick is the bricks that were used, that were made to build the mill, they used some of those bricks to build some of those houses down there in the flat area. Now the houses, as you go up into the hill and over to the new hill, they're white clapboard wood frame houses.
Okay.
And they are mostly on, we'll look at the houses in just a minute, but anyway, there was another part of the village that you didn't hear much about. There was another area that was kind of out of sight, out of mind, and that was called Colored Town. There was an area that had maybe 8, maybe 10 houses out remote from the village, and that was referred to as Colored Town. So they were kind of out of sight, out of mind. It was an era when segregation.
Different era.
Yeah, it was a different era of time. But I can tell you that a lot of children on the village were raised by black maids.
Okay.
My mother had a black maid that came to our home to clean her house and take care of me. And when my mother and father were both on the same shift, she came and took care of me while they worked. And I loved her to death. Her name was Queen.
This is different with the power plant.
Yeah, that's kind of the same shot, but the power plant down at the bottom center is shown there in this photo. I believe the mill has been torn down here. I'm not sure when that aerial view was made. I don't see the mill.
Right. That's one of the houses, just.
That's one of the houses. As I mentioned earlier, up on the hill, the houses were built on a slope or an incline. As you can see there, the houses were not underpinned. What you're looking at there is underpinned. Mm-hmm. But back in the early 40s and the early 50s, the houses had a lattice-type wood frame around the bottom of the house. So there was no underpinning at all on the hill or in the new hill area. So that presented a problem with potential freezing of pipes and that sort of thing. Now the houses were mostly 4 and 5 room houses.
Here's one, well, I still got that in the picture.
Yeah, now that is my house right there.
Oh, okay.
That is my house. And it's underpinned as well, as you can see. They had a front porch and a back porch. And to get to the bathroom, you had to go out onto the back porch to get to the bathroom in the houses. They had no insulation. There were no built-in cabinets. And the lights hung from the ceiling, in the center of the ceiling, from just a wire hanging down.
I remember Grandma used to had those in. What's that thing hanging off the chimney up there nowadays?
Well, you don't see those anymore, do you? Now, that particular one had a rotator on it.
Right.
There was a device on our TV where we could flip it and it would rotate that antenna so that you could pick up Asheville a little better if you wanted to watch Asheville or Greenville. It just depended on what you wanted to watch, where that rotate would take you.
Well, I know that if you didn't have it before the rotation come out, you had to go up to that pole and turn it.
Yeah. Now, the other thing about those houses, back in the 40s and 50s, they were heated with fireplace.
Oh, okay.
Most of them had one fireplace. If it's a 4-bedroom house, they may have 2. Like I said, most of the houses are 4 and 5 bedrooms. I mean 4 and 5 rooms, not bedrooms, excuse me. And there were a few 6-room houses, but most of them are 4 and 5. And I can tell you, in the winter time, when it got really cold, it got cold in the bedroom.
Oh, I imagine it did.
And the way you stayed warm is you piled on quilts.
You couldn't move in, could you?
You couldn't move. But anyway.
This house here, is that, it looked like more like a motel.
That's a boarding house.
Okay.
That house was built near the, I guess near the school and the company store, and you had workers that were from out of town. They didn't have a home there in the village, but they were working in the village. That's where they stayed, and that's where they would eat their meals. You could go there. They prepared meals for them, and they stayed there. It was really like a hotel, as you said.
Almost like a bed and breakfast.
Bed and breakfast.
Yes.
It was a bed and breakfast, and there were a couple of those. There was one right up the street from that one on the same side of the street. But I remember that one right there particularly. Now that's the mill manager's house.
He had a nice house.
He had a nice house. That's set up on a hill, and if you go up on that hill, where I went up there not too long ago, and you have a nice view of the canal and the river, and you could look down from there on to the river and things below. It's a beautiful setting up there on top of that hill.
That's a beautiful. I've been inside that house. It's beautiful inside.
Well, it's now dilapidated.
Yeah.
It's not in very good shape right now.
But I know when I went in, it was nice. Now this is the mills back then. They had their own store, didn't they?
The company store. And that photograph right there that you're looking at, first of all, you can see the walkway going across the canal about the center left. And at the bottom center left is the company store. Small brick building right there at the bottom.
Yeah, I think we got one of the.
And sitting right on.
There's
Yeah.
the
Now that's
picture.
1896 right there. That photograph was taken in 1896. That's the company store.
Now, was it in the same place with like the other picture was? I mean,
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
it didn't. They didn't change much.
No, they just did some cleanup of the windows and different things and made it look a little nicer. That's where all the commerce took place right there. Yeah, those are old photographs that I found. I thought they would be interesting for folks to see. 1896. I got some modern ones, I think.
Now, did the workers there? Did they have it like an account there at the store that they could charge like, and they took it out of their pay, or?
Yes, there were places there, particularly the dry goods store. Maybe in the early days, a lot of it was charged, and they could take it out of their pay. But later on, as say the community cash moved in there, that was kind of a private-owned business, and I don't think that was charged and taken out of your paycheck. I think you dealt directly with the community cash. Now that's the company store I refer to as a mall. It was a mall before there was a mall. We had everything in there. It was a dry goods store, a grocery store, a drug store with a soda fountain, a barber shop, a hair salon, post office, cafe, doctor's office, and a movie theater upstairs.
Wow. Now that was a mall.
That was a mall.
And this is it even had a post office, right?
Yeah, now that's the post office right there, and that's a updated photo of 1950, as you can see right there, of the company store. So the windows have been replaced. It looks a little nicer. Mm-hmm. And yes, that's the post office right there. And right beside it, I believe, was a cafe, Birdie Allgood's Cafe.
That's kind of the rear view.
That's the rear view. The drugstore was on the rear there. On the left-hand corner of that building was the drugstore there in that photograph.
Man, they had everything in there, didn't they?
That was it. You could do everything you needed to do right there. You can even buy a casket in the dry goods store.
Well, I used to deliver up in above Boone up there, and the general store that where it originated at, then they sold caskets up there.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now we could go to the movie. 12 and under was 12 cents. And above the age of 12 at 36 cents. And the movie was on the top floor of that company store, and there was a set of stairs that were fastened to the side of the brick, metal stairs, and the people would crowd onto those stairs. It was a popular movie, and I don't know how they held up. There were so many people on those stairs trying to get into the movie.
Now, do you remember the first movie you went to there?
No, I don't really. It probably was a Frankenstein or something like that.
Yeah.
I think I saw a Frankenstein there. It kind of scared me pretty bad.
It's pretty neat that they had everything there like that. It's just, even my little town didn't have that. I wouldn't think so, but it was, you didn't have to go nowhere, did you?
No, you don't have to go anywhere. As a matter of fact, the bill collectors were there on Thursday afternoon. The workers got paid on Thursday.
Oh, okay.
So they come off the platform there, crossing the bridge across from the mill. There's you pay your insurance guy, whoever you owe money to, he's standing there, and you go ahead and pay him right there. It was the center of commerce.
Now this is that building that you looked at from when we was looking at the aerial to the left there, the depot.
That is the depot.
Okay.
That is the depot, and you can see the company store to the left right there.
Yes. I'd like to have a couple more cars sitting there now.
Yeah. Okay.
Who are these guys?
Well, that's Luke Jenkins and his brother, and I don't remember his name, but in the background there is Runt Conard's store, and I call it the courthouse.
Okay, because I was curious about it. Did they have a courthouse down there?
That's it.
Oh, that was it? It was actually a courthouse too?
Well, let me tell you a story. Runt Conard ran for the magistrate of Pinckney Township, and he was elected as the magistrate. Mm-hmm. And he ran this store. So when there was a event that required a jury to be there and judge whether the person is innocent or guilty, Runt would call 6 men from the mill and tell them to come to the store at 5 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon, or whatever the case may be. Now there's 2 doors going into the store. The one right over the Jenkins head there is leading into the store. Now the lean-to there on the right, where the pickup truck is, there's also a door that leads into that building. And that part of the building is where we stored the heavy things like sacks of flour and that sort of thing. So while Runt conducted a trial outside with the jurors sitting on their stairs and the lawyers out there standing on the ground making their case one way or the other, Runt or I would be in the store with Pancho, who was a relative of mine. We'd be running the store while they conducted a trial out there. That's why I call it the courthouse.
Okay, because I was wondering about that, how it didn't, but again, it's self-contained. I think, is that the store that Edna was talking about, that she used to walk from behind their house to go to the store?
Well, you could leave that store and walk through the woods. If you turn to the right, go right where that 1954 it is, I believe it is, go right by that. It leads right into the woods, and it'll take you right up to where her father's house was later on.
Oh, okay.
To the schoolhouse. Okay, we had some characters in Lockhart, okay? Now, what I was trying to do there is illustrate one of those characters. His name was Johnny Baldwin. Now, Johnny Baldwin is a distant relative of mine. Well, when Runt became magistrate, he selected Joe Ballou to be his constable. That would be the guy that would take the warrants and what have you to the people in the community to tell them that they need to come to the C-run or what have you, or if there's going to be a trial, to come to the courthouse. Well, Joe Ballou got ill and gave up the constable job, so Runt gave it to Johnny Baldwin. Johnny Baldwin was the town plumber. He worked for the textile mill, but he was a plumber. Always wearing overalls with a Stilson wrench on one side of his overalls and a railroad hat, like you see there in that photo. So I'm trying to illustrate Johnny Baldwin. If you look to the right, my hand is on a Stilson wrench. And you look on the left-hand side, I've got a gun, right?
Right.
And a badge on my overalls.
So,
Now, Johnny took the job seriously. When Runt made him the constable,
yeah.
he went out and bought a light, a blue light for his car. It's not, I think it was maybe a Ford, 1950 Ford. Put the light on top, had a siren installed. Now, Joe Ballou didn't do all this, but Johnny took it seriously. So Johnny was out stopping people for running stop signs. He had everybody in town mad at him. He was just stopping people. It was unbelievable what he was doing. It was kind of like an episode on Andy Griffith. It's exactly like an episode on Andy Griffith, where Barney Fife was out getting people for jaywalking and running signs.
Yep.
Well, anyway, it was funny to see Johnny Baldwin walking down the street in his overalls with a Stilson wrench on one side and a gun on the other side. So I was just having a little fun there.
Yeah. Now, I think back then, so far back then, they had red lights. I remember in the 60s when they changed it to blue lights up in North
It
Carolina.
may have been a red light. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I remember when they changed that because I thought, boy, why'd they do that?
Yeah. Okay. That's your Lockhart quick trip. You know, the
12-way bus station.
it was a service station and a 12-way bus station, and you could buy groceries in there. And it was at the intersection of Highway 9 and where 49 comes into Highway 9. Right there in that area was Denton's service station and Trailway bus stop. You could buy your bus ticket right there, and I went to see my grandparents in Chester quite a bit. I'd get on a bus right there, take me right over to Chester.
You know, that Royal Crown Cola there, people don't realize that with a moon pie was just, that was heaven, wasn't it?
Right. But that was a very popular place. And it burned to the ground. So that burned, and then Walt Palmer's service station became the Trailway bus stop.
That kind of looked like a hearse beside it over there.
It may be, I don't know.
No, this is
That's the schoolhouse.
the grammar school.
Grammar school building. As you can see, that's a clapboard wood structure there, and it housed 1 through 3 grades, and diagonally across from that is the high school.
Okay, I think we got the right there.
Yes, that's the whole high school right there. That high school had grades 4 through 12. Now, back when I was going to school in that building, there was no cafeteria. So you either brought a brown bag or you walked home and ate lunch and came back from home. I walked home for lunch every day, walked through an aunt's house who would be preparing lunch for her husband who would be walking from the mill at noon. She always had something hot there in the kitchen as I walked through her house on the way to my house, and I'd pick up a biscuit or something and walk on to my house, eat it home, and then walk back to school.
Yeah, I used to, I lived in that little small town I was telling you about I lived in. The school was right there in my yard. We walked to school.
Now on the right, okay, that was the heading on that is not correct. High school burns 1954. It actually burned February 5th in 1953.
Oh, okay, because, well, you're looking at the paper, I guess.
Yes, I picked up the wrong date when I put the header on it, but it really burned in February of 1953.
Right, well, actually it says it in the bottom down there.
It does. I noticed that later when yeah.
And it's always sad when an old school like that it's just like it almost wipes out memories of it. And
yeah, but what happened after that, what are we going to do? We don't have a school. So what they did, go to the next slide there. That's the National Guard Armory. So what they decided to do is go into the National Guard Armory and put in partitions and make classrooms in that building.
okay.
For us to continue that school year because it burned in February and school's out sometime in June. So we still had another 3 months or so to go to school. And then there were a couple of empty houses. So the mill company made those houses available. And between that and the National Guard Armory, we were able to continue our school. Now the problem with that is that's where we practiced and played our basketball games. So now we don't have a gym because now that's all partitioned off for classrooms. So what they were able to do is make arrangements for us to use the gym at Kelly Pinckney. There was a school in Kelton that was called Kelly Pinckney. So we would get on a bus, they would drive us up to Kelly Pinckney to practice, and then our games would be held in Kelly Pinckney. Now the problem with that is that the Kelly Pinckney gym was not in use. I'm not even sure the school was in service at that time. So if it was a cold day, you go up there and it'd be cold when you were practicing, or for the gym, for that matter. When you played the game in the gym, it would be very cold. There were 2 pot-belly stoves, one in each corner, that heated the gym. On one occasion, there wasn't a very good draft because the weather had warmed up a little bit, and they fired up those pot-belly stoves, and those things started smoking inside. The smoke got so thick, by the end of the boys' game, you could hardly see the basket. Wow. Because of the smoke that accumulated in the roof of that gym up at Kelly Pinckney.
Kathy Dillard, Larry Candler is the one that's talking. You ask, who is this gentleman? His name is Larry Candler. Now, whoops, wait a minute. I think I went to, go back one point.
There may be
there
one.
We go. There's the brand new school, what?
That's the new school.
So everybody remembers that even nowadays.
Yes. Of course, it's shut down now, which is sad, but...
Well, the next slide is it blows me away, because I've been in there to visit someone when it was still Hope Hospital.
Hope Hospital. I think there were about 10 beds in that hospital there. So Lockhart was really a self-contained village, actually. You had a hospital, you had vendors that came from Union, like if milkman would come and he would take your milk and put it in the refrigerator. It came in bottles.
Yes.
Glass bottles. When you finished with your glass bottles, you'd set those out, and when he came the next time, he'd pick up those bottles and he would give you milk for the next week.
Well, my uncle drove a truck for seal test milk, and that's what they had, the glass bottle. They had the metal containers out there that they put the milk in to kind of help preserve it.
Yeah.
What, cheese, and they had, I think, butter, stuff like that sometimes.
And the folks in Union were good about coming to Lockhart and bringing things. I know the dry cleaner from Union would come to Lockhart, pick up your dry cleaning on Monday or Tuesday, and deliver your dry cleaning on Friday clean.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of things like that went on.
And a lot of these stores are going back to some of this stuff here that, they used to do years ago, like delivery from Walmart and things, grocery delivery. Hey,
we were ahead of our time in Lockhart. We were doing these things long before the modern time that we're living in today.
Well, we're going to look at this little muscle man here right in front of this pool.
I can tell you who that is. That's Eddie Roberts. Eddie Roberts was my best friend growing up in Lockhart.
Now, where are you on there?
I'm not in that photo, but
okay,
Monk Vanderford's in the water there. If you remember Monk, I don't know if you knew Monk or not. Lawrence is his name, but he had a nickname Monk. And he's in the water right there. You can see Monk, and that's Eddie Roberts. Now, in addition to that swimming pool, there was a time when we had a miniature golf course to the left of where Eddie is standing, outside the pool area. There was also an outside bowling alley.
Wow.
Where you could go and bowl with the outside bowling lanes there. Now, it wasn't the big bowling balls.
Right.
It was the smaller balls, but nevertheless, we had that available to us for an activity in the community.
So really, back then, we had more activities for teens and stuff like that than they do now.
We had a lot of activities.
It kind of regressed back worse, didn't we, nowadays?
Yeah. Textile League baseball was really big, Jerry. All the mills had a team.
Right.
And they competed against each other. There were teams in the Spartanburg area, Chester, Union, all throughout the Piedmont area there, an immediate area. And you had to be an employee of the mill in order to play on the team. And sometimes the mill would hire someone from an area that was a good baseball player and bring him in and put him to work so he could play on the baseball team.
Bring in a ringer, right?
Yeah. That worked out
I think
well.
Stephen Parrish there said he was the third baby born in Lockhart Hospital November 29th, 1950.
Wow, how about that?
Now, people say, well, Lockhart had Belks, didn't he?
Yeah, yeah, they did. Yeah. Goose Belks service station. Now, Goose Belks was popular for a number of things. He had a television set in there, and back in the 40s and 50s, there weren't many televisions in Lockhart. People started getting televisions in the mid-50s, and I believe it was 1957 when Elvis Presley first appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show. That place was packed with people come up to Goose Belts to watch Elvis Presley on the Ed Sullivan Show.
Wow.
So that was an interesting place right there. Worthy's Cafe.
Worthy's barbecue, sandwiches.
Yeah. Teen Hangout. That was a place where teenagers would go and listen to music from the jukebox and spent a lot of time in that place, eating hamburgers and hot dogs and pickled hog feet.
Ooh.
Now, up the street a few years later, maybe in mid-50s, Van Paris built a place up the road about 2 miles from Worthy's Cafe, and that was a nice place for teenagers to go and congregate and enjoy themselves.
Well, they had a lot of this other stuff they have there. I remember used to be cruising around some of these, we call it the shack house and things. You know, you drove a big Rebel, you drove from one end to the other.
Yeah,
cruising.
right. That's the dope wagon. Now, that'll give you an idea of the how steep the hill was. You can kind of see how that goes down to a flat area down at the bottom at the top of that picture.
But what fun that was, though, because we had some big hills like that too. And the community, we would gather together, and the church would open up and make hot chocolate, and we'd all be out there sleigh riding. They have a little bonfire even.
Yeah, that was neat. But let me tell you, you could not ride up that hill right there straight up. You'd have to go back and forth across on a bicycle.
Yes.
Yes, you had to go back and forth. Back then, you didn't have 10-speed bikes and those kind of things. So it was tough going up that hill on a bicycle.
I know someone, when I was just learning how to ride a bike, someone told me how to ride up a hill. And I said, zigzag? It'll take you longer to get up there, but nope, it worked.
Okay, the mill was torn down in 1995. It was shut down in 1994. Sad day for Lockhart, of course. I discovered something in a restaurant in Greenville, a restaurant called Sassafras in Greenville. We went there, and the owner of the restaurant was talking about, we were talking about how beautiful the floors were in his restaurant. He had a bar there, and the wood on the bar was beautiful. And he said, well, that wood came out of the Lockhart mill.
Wow.
So when they tore that plant down, he bought lumber from that mill and put it in his restaurant. And I said to him, when you walk in here, you're walking on hallowed ground.
That's it. David Denton said that Will Denton had a service station there that sold TVs, and right before, I think he said Goose's Place.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Who's Ed Carter? Now we'll run across this picture.
Well, I'm not going to get into that today. That is my relative who had 4 children with this African-American sharecropper. Mm-hmm. And my wife and I decided to find out the truth about that because people didn't like to talk about that in our family.
Right.
But I heard enough whispers that I knew something was going on that I didn't understand. So we finally put it together, and we were able to find one of Ed Carter's children.
Oh, okay.
Who would be a distant relative of mine.
Wow.
Through his African-American sharecrop. I did want to say a couple other things, and you won't see, that is the child right there. That's Johnny Moore, who is the daughter of Ed Carter and Freddie Worthy. She was a black sharecropper. I wanted to share another thing or two that you wouldn't see in that video there. You can leave that up.
Okay.
But you know, many of the families raised their own food. They had vegetable gardens.
Right.
We had a pasture that was provided by the mill company where you could keep a cow or a pig. And oftentimes you'd see people go down and get their cow, walk it up to their house and milk it, and then they'd walk it back down to the pasture.
Oh.
And during the fall, if you had a hog, there would be a hog killing, and you would be bringing the hog oftentimes. I know the first hog we ever killed, I was a small boy, but I remember it well. They killed it down at the pasture, and then they brought it on a truck up to our house and hung it on an A-frame in order to process that pig and get all the hair off of it and then make the sausage. That's something that started early in the morning and went late into the night.
Wow.
And the neighbors would help with that activity. They would help make sausage and do all the things that you need to do to process the meat from that hog. And that was an interesting experience for a young boy. And I can tell you, after we processed the hog, we ate well.
I bet so.
Now, we ate a lot of fat. Back in those days, we didn't worry about it. We were just wanting to get some food.
Yeah, we had hogs that my father had in the pig pen. We made pets out of them, which was a mistake to do, and because we wouldn't eat it after they took them. And
I want to mention one other thing that's not in those videos that is very unique about Lockhart, or maybe it isn't unique. Most people had a nickname.
Yes.
And they were just all over the place with nicknames. I've got a list of them here. I'll read a couple of them to you. They're kind of interesting. You had Pop, Frog Eye, Shine, Freck, Poncho, Cootie, Tater, Big Chew and Little Chew, Tootsie, Little Man, Goober, and then you had 88, and we called his little brother 44. There's a lot of other names here, but I won't try to read them all. But most of the guys had nicknames.
I heard about the nicknames.
Yeah.
When they were talking about her family would come up and tell it about some of the names that they just come up with some wild names.
I know.
And I just wonder, how did they get those names?
Well, sometimes there's a story behind those names.
Right.
That resulted in them being called, you know.
Well, we're getting close to that time. The time flies by when you're having fun.
It sure does.
And
talking about Lockhart is always fun.
That it is. I'll switch this out here now. But I didn't put the sponsors in but one time because it was so interesting. I didn't want to interrupt the flow. And I want to thank you for coming and being on the show. And because a lot of people were saying, we need to know about Lockhart, because and I learned a bunch, like all this stuff that they had there. And I see where Pam Gibson Shetley said that Bread was Ed Gibson's her daddy. So his nickname was Bread. He must have ate a lot of bread.
I don't know. He was, Ed Gibson, I think, was a singer in the Riverside Boys Quartet, I think. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I believe he was.
Well, Pam, you can enlighten us on that, about your dad. why did you get the name Bread? And,
Of course, I've been going for 63 years, so
that short of time.
yeah.
Now, how long did you stay and live in Lockhart?
Well, I was there full time through age 18, and then I was there during the summer for 3 additional summers. So I left Lockhart after my wife and I married in 1961. I left Lockhart and permanently.
Oh, okay. Well, Larry, I really appreciate you coming on and getting a lot of nice comments about the wonderful things of Lockhart, because we seem, as we get older, and to me, I didn't know because I didn't live there, but I heard it from my wife and others. Maybe this will bring some pleasant memories back memory lane, and also bring some of their families to where they said, I remember this, I remember my dad telling me this. So there's always wonderful to have history recorded, and so they can go back and watch this anytime now, and 5 years from now, hopefully they can go back and watch it. You know what, I heard this, and go in there and watch it and spread the word. So I really appreciate you coming.
Thank you, Jerry, for having me here.
Well, you've heard some great things about Lockhart, and the malls. You know where it started? It started in Lockhart. You can spread that gospel. You know, if you want to do that. Well, next week we're going to have another guest, and as usual, I won't tell you until towards the end of the week, and you'll see who it is. But welcome to join us anytime at 7 o'clock. You can watch this on YouTube or, of course, our Facebook channels. And if you drive down the road, listen to it on the radio from Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio podcast, and Kick, Twitch, and all that other stuff. So we got it everywhere. And I'm Jerry McKee, and thank you for watching. And we will see you next